Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Option Menu Crew podcast. This is episode 46, and we're taking a lighter episode today. We've decided to do what we've been playing today because we've actually played a lot, and a lot of stuff has like come up. So this just felt like the right time to kind of do one of these episodes. It's a got a good thing going here today, don't we, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, if we're recording a gaming podcast, we probably should at least be playing some games, right?
I think we do talk
Or
about a
else.
lot. Yeah, we do talk about a lot of the games that we're playing in context of the topics we're talking about. So I think we're fulfilling our quota, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I've been playing a lot lately. I'm actually taking the week off from work and I've been visiting my parents, so it's like I've got a lot of free time and I've been playing more games. I I guess I was going to talk about it later, but I bought another Xbox to go at my parents' house. I bought a Series S, so I have two Xboxes now, one at my home and one at my parents' house. So when I travel and visit, I won't have to drag my Series X with me. And um, the cloud saving of Xbox really works quite well. I was a little worried I was going to run into problems, but nope, I was able to pick up right where I left off.
Yeah, and you took the leap and just bought an S, so you were just digital. You're not really worried about
I've
discs
pretty
as
much
much anymore.
decided to go digital on Xbox, partially because of Game Pass and like I don't know. I guess I don't really have any like uh nostalgia for Xbox, so it's not like with Switch where like there's some sort of sentimental value towards collecting Switch games. And like with Switch, they're in those neat little cases. They got the cartridge. Like there's something a little bit more appealing than just a plain disc. Um PlayStation, like PS5, I'm still kind of on the edge of whether or not I'm gonna go completely digital. I can't decide yet. But I do know like there's limited amount of space on my shelf, and I kind of don't want to like keep buying more shelves just for games. So, and I do know that eventually they're probably going to be digital only, or at least strongly encouraged to go digital. So it's like I'm gonna have to make the leap at some point, but I don't know about PlayStation yet. But Xbox definitely have. I guess now with the Series S, I have made that commitment digital games because if I buy a physical game, I'm not gonna be able to play it on my ass.
Sure, sure. At the same time, like you said, Game Pass, so you can easily like you don't visit your parents too often. You're hoping to visit them more often at this point, but you can always just treat it like, oh, you know what? I'll just try some Game Pass games here, download some small stuff because I'll only be here for a little bit. You don't have to worry about getting investing a ton of time, and or you don't. You've told me before you don't always have a lot of downtime because you're visiting with them, so you're doing things. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and yeah, I've mostly gone digital unless there's the odd special edition. I don't think I own a single PS5 game on disc yet because I use GameFly so I can rent games and try them before I buy them, and then I will confident in my purchase, so I'll get it, and I have no reason to um either A, trade it in at this point because trade in prices are awful, and by the time I trade in a game, usually the value's so much lower. A lot of my friends don't have PS5s, or are actually a couple of my friends are trying to commit strictly to the digital edition, which I think is weird because I would rather have the option as well as using my PS5 as my Blu-ray player for watching movies. Because sure, call me crazy, but I still like to buy the movie I want to watch, and then whenever I want to watch it, put it on instead of worrying, am I still subscribed to Netflix? Am I still subscribed to Hulu? Is it available on Amazon Prime or whatever? Like, yeah. So I like those features, and I do use them. In fact, I bought a few Blu-rays in the last couple weeks. Um,
You haven't bought your movies digitally? Because I've pretty much decided for movies that I buy just to go all in on digital because I honestly like I never really liked using discs for movies, particularly because Blu-rays are so bad about having like unskippable ads and trailers, and it's always a pain in the butt to get into the main menu of the Blu-ray. Whereas with like streaming, like if I use something on my Apple TV from the iTunes store, I just click the movie and it starts playing. So like not only do I not have to fumble with the disc, the actual experience of watching the movie is usually better. So I've been all in on digital for movies for a while now.
No, I didn't like the digital aspect of movies because you either have to commit to a single like movie streaming source, but also if you were getting the codes, like they had all sorts of different launchers and stuff. I don't even know the names of them. I know you can go to like the easy ones like Amazon Prime Video and Apple, whatever they call their store, um, for that stuff. iTunes, is it still iTunes or is it Apple? What is it called?
iTunes, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I was just like, well, then there's a bunch of movies that don't always come to there. Now they're better about it now. I understand that. So you could still commit, but I'm like, what if for some reason I don't want to tie the media to the device specifically unless it's an exclusive. Like if Apple produces the show, sure. Then but that's not how typically movies work, you know. They're not uh the only thing close.
Well, here I'm gonna do what you did to me in terms of making fun of me, but like you're doing that with Steam. Like everything's in Steam. You're stuck on PC. Like I don't know. To me, it's weird that you are like the opposite of me. Like you like your Blu-rays, but you want all your games digital. So it's like,
No, no, I like I don't.
I can see how I guess it's like one service, but these days every service, even Apple movies have apps on all the other devices, so you can. I'm pretty sure you can watch like I know I can watch my the iTunes movies on my parents' Roku. They have a Roku app, so. But
Yeah.
we're getting like way off the topic here. We've already talked about
Yeah.
digital versus physical a million times.
But yeah, so yes, we've talked about that. We've got our own quirks to it. I think of movies like and games you need the hardware to render it. And it's very, performance is about that. Whereas a movie, you play a file, almost anything can play a movie file at this point. So that's kind of I just wanted to respond to that point. But either way, yes, about what we've been playing in terms of video games. Uh Ed, why don't you start us off because you beat a video game.
Yeah, I finally finished Persona 5 Royal. And I clocked about 130 hours on that, which,
Nice.
for some people that's not the longest game. I think that's longest game they've ever played, but I think that's probably the longest single player game I've ever finished. And it was an undertaking for sure. I started it I think at the beginning of 2021, so it took me over a year to finish it. And that's not like a year of consistently playing it. I set it aside a bunch of times for other games. Pretty much all the games that came out last year that I played, like Ratchet and Clank and Neo: The World Ends with You and Psychonauts 2, were like in place of time I could have been spending on Persona 5 Royal. So it could kind of been on the back burner for a while, but at the beginning of this year I really decided I was going to finish it. Well, after I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake because we needed to finish that for our remakes and remasters episode. But
Mm-hmm.
after that it was all in on Persona 5 Royal. So I finished that and I'm really glad I did. I loved it. I really thought it was a great game. Probably one of the best, RPGs I'd played in a while, if not all time. It really, hit on all notes for me. So I understand. I know you wouldn't like it because you do not like turn-based games,
I'll
and
still
there
give it a
is
try at some point.
yeah, but you're not gonna want to commit over 100 hours to a turn-based RPG. I just can't see you. But
I
maybe
probably
you'll
won't
like all the
100% it no, or like min
yeah.
max any of my S links. Well, bunch.
Well,
Yeah.
in terms of min maxing, right? I don't think I min maxed anything. I barely had enough time. Like for the people who don't know, the game runs on a calendar where there are in-game days from I think it starts in April of one year and runs for almost a year. And the game advances day by day, and some of those days have story events on them that you can't skip or do anything else. But other days you can choose to go into a dungeon, you can choose to spend time with any number of characters in the game. You can choose to do other activities that raise your stats or get you other bonuses that will help you when you do go into combat. Um, but I did not. I mean, I did my best to try to be efficient, but I certainly could have done a lot better. Like there's things I would have done earlier had I known that they would have helped me in other ways had I done them earlier. Um, but I think it was like the very last or second to last day in the calendar in the game that I actually got the final confidant to their max level. So I did not play efficiently. But luckily, the royal version of this game, the enhanced version of Persona 5, um, is a lot more generous with the amount of time it gives you to complete everything. So I I I was able to finish everything that I wanted to, but it was definitely I didn't follow any guide. I remember uh, one of the podcasts we listened to, Sacred Symbols, PlayStation podcast. The host on that, Colin, was talking about how he was playing Persona 4 Golden and was following a guide because he wanted to make sure to like S link everything and get every social link to their max level. And I started out looking at a guide and I was like, do I really want to just sit here day by day checking off the boxes of what I'm supposed to do each day? And I decided I did not want to do that. And I'm glad I didn't because I think it was more fun to make those choices yourself, even if some of the choices were, sometimes it's hard to make, but I think that's true of real life, so you can only do so much in any given time, and it's up to you to make use of your time efficiently and have it be fulfilling. And um it was all that optimization of time and resources was a fun challenge for me. um Even if I obviously didn't play optimally, but I was able to do everything I wanted to, and it was quite satisfying to barely finish it. So, um, I know you said you might be interested in the story because you wanted to play the sequel, right?
Well,
Persona
I
5 Strikers.
well, yeah, I want to play Strikers because it's an action RPG. Um,
Yeah.
so do you have any aspirations to play Strikers now that you've beaten P5R?
Yeah, I'm gonna play it eventually. There are just other games I want to finish first. I kind of want to take a break from all that. Um, I do want to play Strikers, obviously, so I am excited to play that. It really was just so much fun, just having a group of friends in the game, and you know I love all the social links. I liked that in in Fire Emblem Three Houses. I like it in Persona 5 Royal. It's fun just to go through like their levels of story where each level unlocks a new conversation. You can learn a little more about that character.
And
And particularly in Persona 5 Royal, each level, certain levels will get you a bonus that some of them are really helpful in other aspects of the game. It's a really satisfying gameplay loop where you go into dungeons, you're infiltrating and gaining experience, and then outside the dungeons, um you're doing all these other activities that make it that much easier to succeed in your later dungeon adventures. You were gonna say something?
yeah, I wanted to ask you, could you describe a bit of how the social link system works? Like, what are the activities? Because I've never actually delved into exactly what you can and can't do to advance that system.
So there's two main aspects of what you can do outside of I'll call them dungeons, but the word they use is palace, so I guess I'll say palace.
Hmm.
Um, but outside of the palaces, you can spend time on certain activities to uh, increase your social stats. And there's five social stats. There's charm, knowledge, guts, proficiency, and I don't remember why. There's a fifth one. It's escaping me. But there's five levels of those, and you can do activities that there's dozens of things you can do, and they all give you maybe 1, 2, or 3 points in each of those. And as you accumulate points, you go up level by level until you're at the max. And the social stats are important because certain confidants will only let you progress or start them if you meet a certain social stat. So, one of them is this owner of a airsoft gun shop who you buy your weapons from, and you can only start his social, his confidant line if your guts is at level 3 or higher. So you can't start that right away. Um, and so you kind of want to be working on both increasing your social stats, and then the other thing you can do with your time is you can choose to spend time with a character, which if they've met a certain threshold for, their affinity points, I don't know what you call them, um then they will advance the level. So, you can check on the map where they're waiting and see, oh, they're ready to go up a level. And then if you spend time with them, you'll see the whole conversation play out for that level. But it might be the case that they're not able to yet rank up. So if you spend time with them, there'll be no dialogue. It'll just be kind of like, you know, like your caretaker who owns a coffee shop. If you spend time with him and he's not ready to rank up, then it'll just be you like making coffee or cleaning up the shop. So it just shows a quick animation, but there's no actual dialogue involved, and you don't get any bonuses. Um, and one thing that I realized later in the game that I think would have affect how I would do it in the future is certain uh, certain confidants, when you rank up, they also increase some of your social stats. So if I were smarter, knowing that going forward, I could like skip some of the time I spent on activities increasing my social stats, and then spend that time with certain confidants that would also increase my social stats. So there's ways you can get like a 2 for 1 with how you spend your time. And almost all of these activities, save for a few, end up taking up a time slot. And a time slot is usually either after school or in the evening. So on a typical free day, you can do something after school or during the day and something in the evening. Um, but not every day has the same schedule where you're free to do things. There's even times in the game where a whole week will be blocked off and it's just a long story segment where you're advancing dialogue, maybe making a few choices, but I mean, it's all very interesting, and sometimes I have, like, this whole plan ahead of me, and then, like, a story segment pops up, and I'm not able to complete it, so it's like, going into it blind, you kinda have to, roll with the punches because it doesn't always, if you don't know the whole schedule ahead of time, you think you have something lined up, and then, um but it's all very engaging. The only thing I would warn to, a player who might not know much about it is there is quite a bit of dialogue and cutscenes. Like, I'd say it's maybe 50 or 60% dialogue. It's almost like it's almost a lot of it, I guess, would qualify as like a visual novel where you're just advancing. Like, there have been segments where I get on and I play an hour and I spend the whole hour just like advancing dialogue and seeing story content, which I like, but it's definitely not for everyone.
Okay. Is there anything in the palaces that affect like the affinities there, or is it all pretty much in the social part of the game where like you pick and choose who you see or spend time with?
Uh,
Is it like if you
Well,
have them in your
probably
party
not the
or?
main probably not the main palaces that affect the confidants, but there is this side dungeon called Mementos where you can get requests from other characters and you'll go and defeat mini bosses, but
Hmm,
some of the actually probably half the confidants, when you get to like a certain level in their progression, the progression is blocked until you go and defeat a target in Mementos. So it's like some person may be causing them trouble, and you have to go to Mementos, defeat their boss, and change their heart. So like you do have to plan ahead to where you leave yourself time to go into the dungeon, remove that block by taking care of that request, and then you can continue. So there's a little bit of that, but the main story dungeons don't really affect the confidants.
okay, so it's not like in some other RPGs that I've played where like if you're using a character in the party or using their specific character abilities or give them gifts or things like that, like you can constantly be adding to their affinity points.
No, no, Fire Emblem is like that because like if you have characters attack or they're in the or they're adjacent squares, like yeah, that's how you advance there. But
Okay.
these you solely advance it by spending time with them, or there's all these like random activities that may pop up, like it might say like one of your characters wants to go to like the bookstore the next day, so you could say okay, I'll go to the bookstore, and they go and you go with them, and then you might run into two other characters, and then if you answer the right responses you can increase the levels of affinity on all three of those characters. So there's a lot of like, they're not really random events, but you don't really know they're coming. So it's like you can, there's a lot of like, and there's other activities like you can gather your friends around to play darts or billiards, and that has other gameplay benefits. But the mere fact that you have everyone together will increase the level of everyone in the group. So it's, there's a million ways you can do it. Like I guess like there's no real one way to do it properly, unless you're really trying to min max. But I mean, as you can see with how I played in Royal, you don't really need to do that as long as you kind of understand, basic level of planning.
Sure,
Um,
sure. Are there any like what you believe are like Persona 5 Royal specific features or maybe the way they did something you've seen in other games that you would like to see that you really enjoyed and would like to see into other games, or if you want to just talk about any of the things like you really enjoyed the any specifics mechanically or something like that, design, story, characters.
I just liked the whole calendar system and all the social link aspects. I had played Fire Emblem Three Houses before this, and I had read that it took a lot after Persona, but in terms of, choosing how to spend your time and increasing the links with your students in Fire Emblem. But I think a lot of traditional Fire Emblem fans probably didn't like that aspect of the game, but I really did. So I'd like to see them go further in that direction. I don't know if they will. Maybe they'll try something different with the next Fire Emblem game. I'll probably give it a try. But a lot of the reason I liked Three Houses was the fact that it had that social aspect and also the time management aspect. So both of those things I like. I like having to make choices about your time and how to efficiently spend it. And I like increasing the affinity with each of the characters in your party and your friends and stuff.
Okay. And then the opposite of that, was there anything specific that you were just like, you know what, I ended up not really liking this or that? Because I do remember us talking about you were coming up on a very difficult boss fight, which you did end up getting through, but like, you want to describe that situation and why it was kind of troublesome, and if there was anything else in the game that you're just like, you know what, this was a weak part of this game.
Um, I don't know. It would be nice. It would be nice if it were like maybe a little more lenient with the way you spend your time, because I didn't have too much trouble with that boss I was telling you about. Because I had kind of like read ahead, just maybe just focus on these few things so I'm ready. But if you really were not planning on certain things, and you left yourself to the last minute to fight that boss, then you really wouldn't have any time to go back and kind of like prepare and um, you know, do the things you need to do to make it easier. Um, I kind of got in the habit of so each palace, there's a number of palaces. I guess I don't really say how many because people would find that a spoiler, but there's a number of them, and they all take place across the course of a couple weeks. So there's two phases. You have to first go into the palace and find your way to the end of it, and then in another day you have to go in and defeat the boss. So I would kind of spend, say, if I had like 3 weeks until the deadline, I would spend like the first 2 weeks doing activities that would get me ready to go infiltrate and go into the palace, and then I would leave myself a week between when I got to the end of the palace and fight the boss, just to kind of like get ready for things. So I kind of planned ahead to leave myself enough time to correct for mistakes. And I also like I'm always in the habit in these games of keeping rotating saves. So if I really did have trouble, like I could go back to an earlier save. Some people don't do that. I think you're crazy not to keep as many saves as possible, but that's just kind of a quirk of me. So
No,
I think like I guess it's like really hard to demand that a game make everything easy. Um, in terms of like giving you so much leeway when you do have the tools to give yourself some room for error in terms of leaving yourself time in the game in terms of but I would feel bad for people who went in and like got completely blindsided. So it's like I get it. Like that it is maybe it could be a little more lenient in terms of letting you correct for mistakes.
well, what I understand, which is unusual for a lot of turn-based RPGs even these days, is that it actually does have difficulty settings. Doesn't it have like very easy, normal, and hard?
Yeah, but this particular boss is there you have to cause a certain amount of damage within 2 turns for each round of the boss fight. And if you're not making taking advantage of certain game mechanics, you're just gonna have a really hard time causing enough damage to do it. So there's kind of like a it's kind of like a damage check. Like if you're not strong enough, then you're just not going to be able to do it. And and if you don't have a good understanding of the mechanics, it makes it hard to get around that. So I was reading online that people were having trouble even on easy. So
Yeah, it's like a skill check
it
boss. So, like you said, if you don't have a good grasp of the
yeah
mechanics,
yeah.
this boss is tough. In the game, do you feel like the game like signposted it enough? Like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do, and then you just have to go back and figure out how to range your party to get it? Or did you feel like you really had to kind of research and figure it out and think about what is this enemy doing? What is it? Does this work? And like you have to experiment.
If I hadn't like looked ahead a little bit, I think what I would have had to do is like because there were about 6 different rounds of enemies, all with varying weaknesses and strengths, and you encounter those enemies earlier in the dungeon. So theoretically, you should be able to remember what their weaknesses and strengths are. But I would have forgotten it by then, and I would have had to go into the battle and try to figure it out, and probably write it down for like it there's because you don't get to see the strength and weaknesses of an enemy right away until you actually discover them. So the typical way you go through is if you encounter a new enemy, you try various elements or types of attacks and see if they are weak to it, if they repel it, if they absorb it, and as you do that, the game's entry for the enemy will display those, but you don't get to know right away. So it would have been very tedious. Like it would have been doable, but I probably would have had to try a number of times just to actually work out what exactly I needed to do at each stage. In particular, because this boss also has a time limit, so you have to complete it within 30 minutes. And I, even kind of knowing what to do ahead of time, it took me like 20 minutes to finish the boss.
Wow.
So it's like, I really made a lot of mistakes, I probably would have run out of time.
Wow. One last fun question, and then I mean, if you got anything else to say, you're welcome to do so. But I was going to ask, so of the characters, are there any characters where you found like that you didn't like them, but their mechanics or like their buffs that they applied were actually really useful? So you found yourself like, oh, I have to spend time with them, versus like, oh, this character I really enjoy, but their buffs are totally not worth it, and I really don't care, but I like hanging out with them because they're cool. Like, did any of that happen for you?
I don't think so. I think it happened that the few characters I didn't really care much about didn't actually have bonuses that were that useful to me.
Oh, that's
So,
funny. Oh, neat. Very
yeah.
convenient. Very convenient.
But I ended up liking almost all the characters. And
That helps.
they're all interesting in their own way. Yeah.
Right.
Like it would be bad if they wrote a character to be like not unlikable. Like I guess the goal in these games is you want to like all the characters because why else would you want to spend time with these people?
Right.
So
But
they're all kind of endearing in their own way. Some of them are just kind of boring, but
that's good
other
to
than
hear.
that, they're not unlikable.
Yeah, and sometimes they try to write a character likable, but it just doesn't land. Like that happens. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and that reminds me of some other stuff I'll talk about. Was there anything else you wanted to say about Persona 5 Royale before I talk about my first game?
Uh, I just think if you're a fan of JRPGs, it's something you got to try because it really is probably one of the best of the last generation, at least of the ones I played. And I know this year they've been doing the Persona 25th anniversary announcements, and they've all been pretty boring. So maybe the one for April would be better. I think we were just talking about this before we got live, but um, I don't know. I'll be interested to see what they do for Persona 6. They'll probably announce it at the end of this anniversary year in September. I wonder if it'll come to Xbox or Switch or anything else, or if it's only going to be a PlayStation again. That's what I'm curious to know.
I think it would be silly for them not to be bringing it to other platforms. And considering Sega, who owns Atlas at this time, is more interested in PC, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a initiative to bring that game to other platforms. Maybe they can't get it to Switch just yet because Switch is underpowered, so maybe they're going to save that port for, whatever the sequel Switch is. But I could see it coming to Game Pass. And then also going to Xbox as well as being on PC, and hopefully, well, Sega doesn't seem to have a preference for Epic Game Store or Steam, but PC in general. So I think it's likely. It's just a matter of like Sega's got to pull some teeth over at Atlas to get them to do it, because 13 Sentinels finally made it to Switch, and I would have expected that to come onto PC and Switch like at the same time, but they just haven't done it. And it'd be a great Game Pass game too. People go in there, start playing, get hooked on the story, and go like, I need to play the rest of this. So we'll see though. Hopefully it will be, because
Well,
more.
I mean, I think all these games probably would be good to find a way to make them on work on the Switch because Japan loves the Switch. I mean, I feel like if you're a game targeting the Japanese market, you're better to find a way to get yourself on Switch, even if it's not the best experience.
I disagree with that in general. I think all the cloud versions on Switch are just abominations. Like they shouldn't be doing
Well, I don't
that.
mean a cloud version.
Right, but that
They
is
they
a
got they got Persona 5 Strikers is on Switch.
right, and I was going to bring that up too. In terms of hope for like, hey, like Persona 5 Strikers came to PS4, Switch, and PC all day and date together. So there's a chance that Persona 5 Royal will be like ported. And who knows if there's any type of weird Sony deals that like Sony like pays extra to make sure that they get exclusivity. And it's not just Atlas being like heavily preferential for their project. But we'll see. Um, yeah, well, thank you, Ed, for talking about Persona 5 Royal. And so what I'm going to talk about is a game that everyone can't stop talking about, and that's Elden Ring. By the time you hear this episode, I will hopefully have beaten my first run. I guess I'll start there. Is my game clock is over 300 hours at this point in my file. Um, Part of that does involve a lot of idling and stuff because sometimes I just leave it on and it was kind of like plugging away at it throughout the day. Um, but it would and some grinding, of course, because who doesn't grind in these? And for those who don't know, Elden Ring is the latest game from FromSoft, who From Software, who makes the Dark Souls series, is responsible for Demon Souls, exclusive to PlayStation, and Bloodborne, which was exclusive to PlayStation 4 currently. So, and the makers of Sekiro, that's multi-platform, that was published by Activision. So our audience should know from what FromSoft is about, and pretty much everything you've heard about Elden Ring is true. It is an open world game. It is still very challenging and as a action RPG, and it is more accessible because of the open world. I feel like there's so much to talk about in this game that I really kind of wanted to just like a highlight reel here of like what's great about this game and what's kind of still frustrating to me. So what's great? The level design. The way the world map expands over time and where you just kind of find out how big this game is. It's just you don't see this in other games. And it's not just like, oh, this is like a big map, because it's really probably by like square footage or whatever, it's not as big as some of the other maps that open world games that advertise to be these giant maps that you can explore everywhere, but really don't have anything going on. Elden Ring feels huge because it's so densely packed that rarely does any space feel like it's useless or that it's like not leading you somewhere that's worthwhile. Even if it's just like you see a shiny, an item, they glow in the distance. You're like, okay, let me go over there. And usually something is interesting about that experience, whether it's the item you're going to get, the enemies that are surrounding it, and it could be a surprise attack or there could be an extra element to it. There's just a lot to it that it's wild. It's wild to just explore it, and that's the part I enjoy the most is like the scenery, the different elements I've seen, that the sheer enemy variety, finding these bonus caves that usually have really good loot in them, as well as having like neat gimmicks, almost like Zelda-y. It does remind me of Breath of the Wild in terms of like they're like the the shrines where
Shrines.
yeah, where you go in and there's like a gimmick and you solve the gimmick to get to the end. So there's that, and it like each one has like their own unique gimmick to some sort, even though they look very similar. So in one way that's like that. And there's not like a ton of them, and you definitely don't need to do all of them. Some are better than others, and definitely they can be very different or unique between. They use some of the same enemies, but it never feels, and I think that's the thing. Despite how much it feels like some stuff eventually you see is like recycled, it never feels like it's too repetitive. It always feels fresh. It always feels like, okay, well, yes, but do you have a new trick for me? And that's part of like FromSoft's gimmick is like when you die to the bosses over and over again, usually what happens is you go in and the boss did something new. And it could take like 10 tries before you've actually seen all of the boss's moveset. And then still you get to like the second phase of a boss fight and or its health gets like 50% or something like that, and suddenly it pulls out a new move it doesn't do normally. So it just this game is just full of detail. It is dense, and that's what have always, or I've tried to articulate, is what feels like the problem with a lot of open world games is that they're not dense. They're wide and they're flat and they don't have anything really cool. And when I say flat, I don't necessarily mean like geography wise. Like I wouldn't say Grand Theft Auto 5 is specifically like flat in terms, because yeah, there's the buildings and you can get in helicopters. Yes, I get that. I'm talking about like those buildings are not really important or anything. They're there to make a city look like a city, and they're just kind of there to be there. Whereas with Elden Ring, it's looking around, and if you look around a corner, something new is going on over here. And if you turn your camera the other way, there's a whole other set of stuff going on. And some of it is also just like environmental storytelling, because FromSoft has its own writing style in which it's like there's a lore to the world and there's a story that happened before you. And now you are at like coming in at like the final chapter of this world, and you are the last chapter of this whole story. And that can be hit or miss for people. For me, I personally prefer a much more straightforward, like seeing the whole story, like what you described with Persona 5 Royal and most Japanese RPGs, where you're playing along with the story beats. This is basically you're at the end chapter now, and that works really well for a certain set of people. In this way, like there's not a lot of dialogue. You're really playing the game all the time, and there is a charm to that. And I'd say this one kind of splits the difference the best, because eventually you do meet like characters and NPCs and talk to them, and they give you like pretty good story beats and good characterization and enough information to like flesh out this world and where it is, and give you kind of, it fills in better for a story, for this last chapter of the story, of information that's relevant to it, as well as piecing in, stuff that happened in the history. Why is this like this and why is this like that? So that's all cool stuff. The sheer amount of weapons is also really great. You can find so many different things. All of them have different skills. There's like two types of weapons in the game. Or two classes of weapons, I should say. There's the legendary class of weapons, which they all have like really unique abilities, usually really unique designs, and higher stats overall. And then there's the like I guess more traditional style weapons, which there's a lot of. And what's cool about them is while their stats are usually lower, and you can upgrade them more, but you have to upgrade them more to get them to like match the stats of legendary gear. Um, they usually don't have a unique weapon skill built into them. Instead, you can then equip and hot slot in all these other weapon abilities. So sometimes you can find unique weapons that have a special skill. You're like, oh, that's really cool, but I wish it wasn't on like this weapon. Like you can see a really cool skill on a sword, but maybe you want to put it on an axe or a hammer or a spear. And you can go looking around and there's these drops that basically are the weapon skills. And then you can equip them to different types. You can't use everything across everything. Some are very specific weapon types. Like you can only use it on swords or you can only use it on giant weapons. But for the main portion is they can apply to a lot of them and you can apply them to the weapons you do like, give them better stats, or you can even adjust them. And unlike some other games or in tough ways, like there's no penalty or cost for doing this. You find the weapon, you find the skill, you slot it in, you can slot it in for free, you can take it off for free, you can move it to another weapon whenever you want. And then there's also, you find another key item that gives you additional ways to adjust the perks on your weapon, so you can get better damage one way or another, or change the way it does damage, like in terms of elements. So for Persona, you know that there's all the they have their own naming convention for it. But for this one, it's pretty simple of like doing like types of element: magic, fire, holy, lightning, etc. And then there's like secondary like status effect things like bleed, poison, rot, frost, and things like that. And you can mix and match or adjust these to figure out what kind of strategy you want, or tailor it to the types of enemies in the area you're fighting. If they have like specific weaknesses or they're more likely. It's hard to say anything really has a specific weakness because everything's kind of tough. A lot of the smaller enemies do have exploitable weaknesses, and some stuff is harder to figure out, and some stuff's easier to figure out. Some of it's intuitive, and that's where like it's kind of hit or miss. Like this game's, it's a 50-50 style deal for real. Is like, because the game lets you figure out so much stuff, there's almost too much that it doesn't in some way spell out. But in the other way, it's really cool when you do figure out certain things. But the other part is FromSoft has designed these games to be community games. Ed, are you aware of like the community features for like the signs and things like that when you're playing in online mode? Have you heard of them?
Yeah, I've watched some streams of people playing it. I know like the blood stains and the signs, and
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen, and how you can see what other people tell you, and sometimes they lie, sometimes they're helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So FromSoft does really want you to communicate with other people about the game. They want you to be sharing secrets. They want to do like what has been classically said over here in America. Like, this is the playground talk. Like, have you seen this? Because this happened to me. And you're like, no, what happened? It's like, yo, I did this and this and this, and I got this. Did you get that? It's like, no, I totally didn't get it. Where is that? What? That never happened for me. Like, this game has that experience in spades, even when you know what's going on. And that's another thing. Like, it's dense. This game is dense. You can play this game in several ways. Quests can be completed in different orders. Sometimes they break, which is true, both intentionally and unintentionally in terms of like design. Like if you kill an NPC, you can sometimes end the quest there. Sometimes that's a legitimate thing that you can do, and it proceeds the quest in a certain way. But then there's unintended, because this game does allow you to attack NPCs from time to time. And if you do kill an NPC or anger an NPC that you weren't done with, there is a mechanic in the game that allows you to go and kind of reset the world state and bring them back. But if that reaches a certain was part of a like quest state, you can't always reverse it. Like, I reached the end of a quest line and a character I didn't want to die ended up dead. And so I tried to go back and use the mechanic to bring them back and undo this. And you couldn't, because it was actually the way it played out was part of the quest line. So there's certain things you can't walk back. The The other thing I really want to bring up that's been a blast, but also a pain in the butt, is the multiplayer. Co-oping with your friends in this game is super fun. This is the kind of game where like it's challenging enough that like bringing in someone else helps a lot, and you can play offline and you can play solo with using the new spirit feature that they have, which basically gives you like, it's kind of Pokemon-ish. You collect enemy types and then you can summon them in, and then they can fight enemies and they help like distract aggro. They all have different abilities, so some of them are better for different enemy types and whatnot. It's really cool. You can find them, you can upgrade them. They're basically like another piece of gear. And so what happens is you can't use the summon feature when you're playing with your friends, but instead your friend is your summon. So you get to bring all their experience and all their gear in. Now the game does have to balance this out so that way it doesn't do like the dumb thing, or I shouldn't say the dumb thing. It doesn't do like the classic stuff of like, hey, I'm going to bring in my overpowered friend to just like carry me through the game. If you bring in someone who's higher level than you, then they are scaled down to approximately your level. You still keep some benefits from like having upgraded gear and armor, but it's just far less beneficial. And it's hard to describe exactly how much stats do and don't matter, because it feels really inconsistent in this very deliberate sense. Like leveling up your character lets you use different types of gear and spells, but your weapons, like leveling up your weapons specifically is where you really get more damage. So while your stats can affect how much damage your weapon does, your upgrading your weapon is more in terms of what will do that. You can't upgrade armor, but armor stats are weird. Like, and sometimes specific armor sets can really make a difference. Oftentimes you'll be mixing and matching pieces in order to get like your numbers up, but enemies are still usually always doing tons of damage that it's more important to just wear enough armor to give yourself some protection, but not go over your weight limit, so that way you're not like doing what's called a fat roll. Because you can have, if your character's not carrying too much gear and you're lighter, you can run faster, you use less stamina, and you can roll. And I think your roll actually has more invincibility frames. Most people try to go for the medium, and then heavy is where like you're probably carrying a lot of gear on you, but you can't move nearly as fast. You're using up more stamina, etc. Things like that. And the encumbrance system isn't like say Skyrim or something, or some other games where it's like, oh, if you carry a bunch of stuff on your person, it weighs you down. No, it's just you have your gear slots, which you get 6, 3 for each hand, left and right. You get 4 armor slots: head, chest, arms, and legs. And then you also get 4. Eventually in the game, you'll get 4 talisman slots, which are accessories, and they have very little weight, but they usually have big benefits to them. So those things are what determine your weight limit. So it's basically what's on your hot slots, kind of. But there is like an equipment gear. There's 10 slots, and these are free. It's just tools that you can use. Whether usually it's like throwables or consumables. Those don't cost any weight. And then your bag, your inventory, your backpack, whatever you want to call it, overall doesn't attribute anything. So you can keep on your person every weapon and piece of armor you've ever collected, and it doesn't weigh you down. It's only what you equip. And there's also a chest at the checkpoints, so you can sort those out and put those away. I've gotten super off topic from the multiplayer, but so there's all these really great features. Fast travel, super convenient. It's free. You just got to unlock the checkpoints to get there. But when you play with your friends, there's a lot of features they lock off. So not only do they scale you down, but then they lock off certain things. I don't know the exact reasons for this. Some of it is like lore related. Some of it has been, I've heard people say it's network related, but I'm not 100% convinced, because there's a PC mod coming out for the game that addresses a lot of these issues and lets a lot of these things happen. And I think the game is still challenging enough, because people, when they play multiplayer, want to engage with the game, but they are choosing to engage in the game on their terms. And Elden Ring does let you kind of engage in the game on your terms, because if you hit a challenge, and this is probably why it's like so much more approachable, is like if you hit a wall, you're at a boss, an enemy area, it's not like the other games where it's like you only had like 5 paths. You've already explored the other 4, and this one path is progress. This is like, I hit the wall here, oh well, I'm just going to go off in this direction and see what I find. And it's filled with like, well, I'm going to go this direction, I'm going to go this. What if I go back here and I'll go here? Oh, a friend told me about this, and oh my god, like you can always make progress without any of this stuff, without feeling like you're locked off from doing anything. There's just so much there that's not locked behind certain progress blockers, which is why it's so awesome. Then with the multiplayer, so like you get a horse, you can't ride your horse in multiplayer. When you're trying to explore, there's like the mini side dungeons and there's like the main dungeons and stuff. And so you're locked off from going into certain spots. Like I can lead my friend to a secret dungeon, but there's a fog wall that says like, no, you can't go here. So what has to happen is I have to leave his game, and then I have to let him go into the dungeon, go on the other side of that fog wall. He'll usually hit the checkpoint, and then I'll put my summon sign down allowed for the checkpoint. Even just little stuff, like you get key items that are infinite and reusable that let you for co-oping, but it requires a consumable in order to like activate the co-op. So like the host player has to use a consumable item that has a limited quantity. They're easy to craft and easy to find, but it still has a limited quantity for some reason, despite the fact that they make it effectively infinite. So that way they can see your multiplayer sign. And then your multiplayer sign that you put on the ground is an infinite reusable item. Doesn't require any consumables. And it's some weird like conflicting design philosophies that they have. So I had to go in the game, walk them to the area, leave the game, go back on the other side of the wall, wait for them to go in, and then they call me back in. One of those things where I'm not sure if it's actually a technical or a weird design thing, but that's the truth. Also, for like the big main dungeons, you can go in there and you can play as long as your friend hasn't beat, or the host, I should say, the host player hasn't beaten the boss of that area. Once you beat the boss, that area is completely inaccessible to co-op. So if there were any secrets or things that you guys wanted to go through at the end, you can't do it. And we learned that the hard way because we went through the first main castle and I was like, oh, we beat the boss. Oh yeah, I'll take you to the underground area later. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And so we beat the boss, and then we're like, why can't we get back in here? Now there's loading tips, but since I'm playing on PC, the loading tips like go by really fast and I can't really always read them. And those loading tips aren't actually somewhere else in the menu for me to read, or at least I don't think so. I think the inventory has like a window section, but they're like different. I'd have to double check. And I'm sure I could go on YouTube and find all the loading screen things for them. The PS5 version, however, because they optimized it for the loading times on that game, actually has no loading tips. PS4 version does, PC version does. Which is really funny. So I don't know why, like, even if they did that, like always with the loading tips, if you're going to put loading tips that are actually like useful, let there be a prompt or put in a toggle in the options to auto skip if you want, but otherwise default to player presses button in order to leave the screen.
Yeah, so, I agree.
Yeah.
I think, doesn't Horizon Forbidden West do that? I thought I was reading. Yeah.
I think they do.
You'll find out. You'll find out.
I will, yeah. Yeah. So the other part is, yeah, so that's frustrating there, but also when you co-op, that's the only way you can you're forced to be invaded, which means other players choose. It's 100% chosen. There are like some like fake invasions where it's NPCs, like there are events in the world, and you just learn where those are. They're in specific sections, etc. You know exactly how they work and how they trigger. But if you're co-oping at all, you are 100% open to being invaded by other players who then come and attack you. And sure, it's at least usually a 2v1 situation. So there's two, friendly players versus one invader. So the odds are naturally in your favor. But because of the way the game is, and because players can come in with better gear, or there's ways to like smurf essentially, you can still get wrecked by invaders. But it's not even that necessarily. The other part is invaders have like no restrictions on how long they can drag out a fight. So if they know they're going to lose, but they are just going to like play the waiting game on you, they don't have any limitations on it. So like a good invader would just come, fight you, and either they'd win or they'd die. That's how it should be. But what can happen is if you're like able to pick off an invader, or you've been like whittling down their health, and they're like, oh well, I want to. Enemies don't aggro on them, but they can like get you to trigger enemies and have them like get in your way. So a lot of invaders try to like kite you towards or lure you towards, enemies or hostile NPCs, so that way they get some odds in their favor. They can still get hit by those enemies, but the enemies just never target them. But there's no restriction for like how far they can be. There's nothing like forcing the invader to push in on you. Like there's no like closing in wall or saying like, hey, you're too far away from them, so you need to move closer or else you'll get kicked. There's also no time limit. I was playing with my friend, and we were in a castle. We were trying to do a dungeon, and this invader came in. We were waiting for him. We had a couple skirmishes, but he kept backing off. The invader kept like backing off, and you can do the dodge rolls, and because of hitboxes with delay, the character where you can hit them is never quite what it seems like on the screen, which is also super annoying. So you have to find exploitative ways to like do really big attacks to hit them, and time things really weirdly. But we were winning, clearly. The person probably used up all the recovery items, and so what they decided to do was just leave. They just went back, or not leave the game, but just like retreat and go to someplace else. But they stayed in our game, and they couldn't leave. Like, so we started just moving forward, and we just had to worry about whether or not they'd try and catch up with us. And when an invader's there and they can play a different way than enemies, and enemies you can more reliably hit, like their hitboxes and stuff line up well, it's just really annoying. And so that enemy just stayed somewhere in our world, or in my friend's world, and there was no time limit. There was nothing we could do to kick him. Luckily, there's no penalty for you just quitting the game, but it causes you to lose time. And if you go back in the game, it's unclear like how long you're queued up for, or how far back in a queue you go for like it being invaded. In our experience, it's usually about the first minute is usually when you'll get invaded once you start a co-op session. And then after you've done an invasion, it usually like pushes you back about 5 minutes or so, it seems like. But it can take longer, and there's some areas, because it's also like players have to be in the area trying to invade in order to do it. It doesn't seem to just pull them in from anywhere. So you can be in a highly populated area where you get invaded a ton, or you can be in a section where you can't be invaded at all, because just nobody's there, which that's cool. And the thing that really sucks about that as well is that there's an item in the game that lets you turn on invasions if you're playing solo. By default, you don't get invaded if you're playing offline, or if you're being played, or you're playing solo with online features enabled. You can find an item that will let you have invasions happen to you while you're soloing, and also it enables like multiple invaders to invade your world, which normally there can only be one. So considering that they have this, I just think it's super frustrating, combined with all the other aspects to the game that are there. That has been the most disruptive thing, is having invaders. I get that there's people who like invasions and think it's part of the game and enjoy having that. And I honestly don't care about how it would affect those invaders' experience, because it's 100% an optional thing. They are choosing to go in and grief players. Like, when you do this, that is 100% what you're doing. There is no like other aspect to it. There's nothing about the game that says you have to invade. There's one quest line, and it's an optional quest line where you can choose to invade, and you can just go in. You can either fight guys or let yourself get killed, whatever. But that's the only time that invasions are like like actual player versus player, not like AI side quest things that are in the game, is required. So that's been the most frustrating part, and that mod's going to address that and remove a bunch of that stuff and make it easy so 4 people can play together, because you can only actually play with 2 other friends, so 3 friendly players and 1 invader. You can't do 4 to lock them out. But the mod's going to let you do 4 players. It's going to let everyone ride their horses. It's going to take down all those network barriers. It's going to let people fast travel. Oh, you can't access the checkpoints or the fast travel systems while you're in the game. You have to exit. You can only go to places that both players have unlocked, which isn't terrible when you've got all these extra things gating progress. You can't like help your friend get all the way there, especially since like the game's hard enough and it buffs the enemies naturally when you're playing co-op. So they get more health, they get more resistances. So all these things are already balancing the factors. And I've complained about this with Resident Evil. It's like, I understand trying to maintain a balance, but sometimes you just go too far. Too many things are making this game hard, and you think that works. The developers think that works. And I'm like, it's just too much. Like, stop. You're now actively ruining people's fun to the point that it is an active discouragement of using a feature. And I honestly feel that way. Like, the invasion system as it exists isn't an active discouragement of playing multiplayer. Oh, also they have a duel system, like for consensual PvP, where if you want to just fight people, you can put down a sign, and it's literally like, this is dueling. This is for, do you want to invite someone to fight you? And they are opting in to fight. Like, this is the whole point of it. So there's two systems. There's the invading system and the duel system. So considering FromSoft added all that in, and obviously has multiplayer and co-op, it's just unfortunate that like they just didn't completely separate it. So the people who just want to play with their friends and do a pure co-op experience with a game that's already hard enough, and add in this randomized element that really does just disrupt the flow. And I can say, like, last night I was playing, and we were just trying to kill a dragon, and we kept getting interrupted by invaders. So what would have taken us maybe an hour to actually figure out how to kill this dragon together ended up into 2 hours without us killing the dragon because we kept getting invaded. And you don't get anything really good for killing invaders. So it's not even like satisfying. If I was getting tons of currency inside the game for killing invaders, then yeah, it'd be like, okay, this is totally worth it. I'm like getting a level every time I kill an invader, or half a level or something like that. But you're not. It doesn't ever work out that way. So it really is just a pester system. So that's my biggest complaint. The game's still hard. There's still stuff about that, but at the same time, like, you can learn a lot. You can choose to actually cheese enemies. There's a lot of opportunities to just figure out strategies, and basically you're spending your time one way or another. You can either fight guys the long way and guarantee yourself the victory, or you can try and go in and play the fun way and usually get your butt kicked, hundreds of times, dozens to hundreds of times, depending on how it goes for you and what build. It's pretty cool. I'm really close to the end, and I'm just waiting because I'm trying to help my friend co-op through their first run as well, and stuff changed, so it makes it easier if I just wait before I hit my New Game Plus. But yeah, that's basically it with Elden Ring. I think it's really good. I don't recommend it to everyone, but if you know what it is, or I'd say, like, try it. Maybe this will be your thing, or you'll get enough time out of it. I think anyone, even if you don't beat the game, can easily spend 50 to 60 hours or whatever amount you think like a full-priced video game is worth and enjoy it. But definitely, like, buyer beware. Try it. Don't, like, know what you're getting into.
Yeah, the more I watch it on on streams, it's just, I realize it's not for me. Honestly, even the combat doesn't look fun to me. It looks, I don't know, very deliberate in a way that maybe I don't think I would enjoy. The biggest draw to me, I would say, is just the sheer enemy variety. Like you said, I love so many of the ways the enemy, I think so many of the enemies just look just like horrifying in the best way, or just very creepy or creative. I love that. And the environment looks good, like the open world. But I'm not really big into open world games. I did want to ask you though. So did you go into it completely blind? What have you learned everything that you've learned about the game just playing it?
Um, I have tried to play it fairly blind. I should say, like, I definitely knew the game was going to be tough, and without any sort of other difficulty sliders, I was like, I'm going to look up stuff as I feel it's necessary, but I'm going to give everything an honest shot. I tried not to, like, look up any super strong weapons or armor, things like that, until I got to the point in the game where I was just like, I had enough gear that I'm like, where can I find, like, the next really cool thing? Or at least when I felt like I was running out of things to explore, or if I got lost, like genuinely lost, and I wasn't sure what's the next thing to do, because there can be some obtuse part. But I've tried to play fairly blind, and find things on my own, beat enemies on my own, and only look up strategies when I felt like I really couldn't. I had no idea what I should be doing or if I was in the right spot. But what's also funny is I've been watching like other streamers, and I was alternating between two streams and just kind of um when I was further than them, I watched up to when they got to about where I was. But considering how non-linear the game is in terms of how big this world is and all the places you can go, and there's usually not every area, but there's usually more two ways at least to get into a zone. The official way and then like the secret way. Um, they would sometimes go in different orders and find other things. So in the process of watching these people and just kind of seeing them go through the spots there, they would go and find things that I'm like, I missed that. Wait, where was that? And or I didn't get that. When did that happen? And I'm not just talking about like random loot drops. Like that's kind of cool. Like I got specific drops, they got specific drops that were just, luck of the draw, and that's pretty cool. But then there's like spots and things, and I'm like, so I would, I'm making a face. I'm like, huh, and then I would go and find that. And I don't feel that like a spoiler thing because once again, I go back to FromSoft developed this game with community features in mind, and is meant to kind of like help people out. So they want you to talk to people, and you're supposed to be like getting hearsay. So I don't feel too bad about it. It's more about like when it comes down to, well, is the solution actually flexible, and you have a couple different things that could work really well, or is it like the best solution is also the lamest solution, whereas like it's not really fun or it's whatnot, and that can depend on what your playstyles are. I play a bit more defensively, or a mix of offensive and defensive. I should say, with leaning a bit more offensively, but it it's sometimes like the way to beat things is either way more offensively, way more skill heavy in terms of like learning how to parry an enemy, which is really tricky in that game. Um, so yeah, that's the thing. It's like mostly blind, but I've been not afraid of looking up assistance or being like learning about specific stuff that would help me progress.
Sure, sure. Man, we both played two pretty big games.
Yeah, and
lot
so
of lot to digest.
yeah, and I'm still playing it. Like I said, I'm just two bosses away. I'm a side boss that I'm saving, the hardest, probably the hardest boss in the game, and then the final boss. So for
You're
people who
very
know,
close.
yeah, it's just a choice. Like I said, I'm helping a friend get through the game and catch them up to where I am, and we'll basically be there. And I'm beelining them through for this stuff as best I can, without making it like I ask them along the way. Like I'm not trying to direct it. I'll be like, well, we can do this or we can do that, and progress is this way. What would you like to do right now? And then let them choose, and then just kind of play along with that based on how they're feeling at the time. So there's that. But yeah, so that was my one big game. Uh, Ed, what was your next game you're playing?
Well, we spent a lot of time on those first two, so I'm probably just gonna briefly go over the two games that I'm playing right now.
Yeah, same.
Um, so I right after Persona 5 Royal, and actually I think a little bit before I finished it, because I was like getting a little fatigued of Persona, so I wanted to try something else, and now that's what I'm playing is Yakuza Like a Dragon. And I remember hearing this, probably heard about this on podcasts that I was listening to. A few of them talked about it and spoke really highly of it, so it was on my list of games that I wanted to play, and I saw that it was on Game Pass, so that's where I started it. It's another turn-based RPG. I guess I play a lot of those. um, and I'd never played a Yakuza game before. The main reason I was interested in this one is because they switched it to turn-based combat from the kind of action brawler that it used to be in the first seven or so games.
Or
And
6, or yeah, I guess 7 because 0.
seven, including Yakuza Zero. There's like the prequel game, yeah.
Not counting the
Eh,
remakes that are mixed in.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I also, because it was kind of a soft reboot where they started a new story with a new character, so I didn't have to like worry too much about the old games. I guess there are like callbacks for fans of the series, but I'm still immensely enjoying it as is. I
Yeah.
mean, all the characters are great. The story is really compelling. and a lot of the side content is fun too. You know, I just got to chapter 7, and you know, the story is very urgent, like, but I'm like, oh, I'll go help this old lady cross the street. You know, there's a lot of there's a lot of the sub stories are very amusing. There's a lot of fun mini games, so I'm really enjoying the side content. Uh and really just story and characters are great. I mean, to me that's hugely important when I play a game, and like Yakuza Like a Dragon delivers in spades. I will say the actual gameplay, like the turn-based gameplay, can get a little tedious. I think I told you the other day that I got to a point where I was in this like sewer dungeon, and it had to have like 5 or 6 floors of, you know, just going after identical after identical floor, just going through mobs of enemies. And I was like, when is this going to be over? So that was very tedious. And a lot of it's just use the same attacks. Like, you know, maybe it'll get a little bit more strategic later in the game, but I'm over 20 hours in, and I'm still basically just using the same attacks as I
Mm.
did at the beginning of the game. So it's like, it's certainly not the most complex, and a lot of the level designs in terms of dungeons are kind of lacking. So I hope that the, you know, the studio that makes the Yakuza games is I hope they learn from what they've done in this one, and maybe since they've said the main line like Yakuza games are going to be turn based going forward, that they'll learn from that and try to improve upon it. And I bet they will. You know, it's I guess it's hard to really criticize them when the whole idea of making it a turn based RPG started out as an April Fool's joke, and then the reception to that was so positive that they kind of went with it. So I, for as much as they were able to accomplish, and you know, I think they had like 6 or 8 months to release it. Uh, Following that decision, it's a big accomplishment in my opinion. Um,
Hmm.
had you ever played any of the Yakuza games, or would they interest you?
No, but as I've learned
Maybe
more,
the older ones.
I haven't yet, but as I've learned more about them, they do definitely seem like I would enjoy them, especially Yakuza 0 through 6, which are action RPGs.
Yeah,
I started seeing more and more gifs and stuff about these games. So, I don't know if they're all on PC yet, because that's like
I
maybe I'll
think they are. I think they are.
um I guess I would start
Except for Judgment. Judgment is not.
Judgment 1.
Judgment and
No, it's
Lost
not.
Judgment are not.
Yeah. And there's specific reasons why those aren't on
Yeah,
PC,
we
which is
both know.
unfortunate. Yeah. But I feel like I'm going to try Yakuza at some point. I have to find a point to slot it in to give it a real honest try. I thought about even playing Yakuza 7 because I just heard the story so good. I know I'm not a fan of turn-based, but it felt like the characters are endearing. It's a great world, a great premise. I did have a quick question for you about like the combat you were mentioning. What do you feel like the combat was getting stale because because you were like the moves you're using are just like the most effective moves and the other moves are not effective? Or is it just that like everything's equally effective, so you just kind of use whatever's like the quickest?
I mean, a lot of times I'm just using basic attacks.
Hmm.
um, because I haven't grinded or anything. I did like a few side stories, but
Sure.
it's not like I went out of my way to level up. So far the game has been pretty easy, and you know, I'll either use a basic attack, or I'll use one that is slightly stronger and uses some MP, or I've used some buffs and debuffs here or there, but not that much. I think I use buffs in a couple battles, like boss battles, but you don't really need them in basic battles, and it's it's very
Yeah.
basic.
Is
Um,
the does it feel like you're not encouraged to try other moves, or do you just not have a lot of moves? You feel like you've got a good grasp on your like other abilities?
I don't feel like I have a huge repertoire of abilities right now. Most of
Okay.
them are just variations of like physical attacks or healing attacks or buffs and debuffs.
Okay.
I have like a fire spell on one of my characters, and I think I need to play. Maybe I need to play more with the class system. So I was thinking that in this chapter that I just started, it unlocked that long, tedious dungeon
Mhm.
as an option to go in and grind. So, like, I guess I'm just a glutton for punishment. I was feeling like I
Maybe.
might go in there, try to grind some more, see if I can play around with some jobs, learn some new skills, and see if I find some more fun. But I guess I complain about the just the grinding, but I guess I kind of like it because then I could just watch like watch YouTube while I just sit there and beat up some more guys. So
Yeah.
it's but I can tell you would hate it.
I don't know. We'll we'll
The
we'll have to see.
combat.
If
Yeah, you
it's
can try it.
yeah, that's the thing. I plan on trying it at some point. It is
It's on
not.
Game Pass. It's on Game
It
Pass.
is. It is, and I can. There are multiple ways I'd be able to try that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just curious, but it is also to your point. If the game is not encouraging you to engage with those other systems and like naturally leading you to explore that other stuff, then I think that's also a thing you've been able to get through just fine with what your basic stuff is. So,
pretty much.
and I hope it doesn't come to the point where you hit like a uh difficulty spike. That's what forces you to do it. Maybe something natural would happen.
There is a pretty big difficulty spike I've read. So yeah,
So,
I'm expecting to have to do some grinding to get past it. I've heard.
well, I'm very curious to
Um,
hear more about what your experience is. So I'll take on my next game unless you had anything else to say about Yakuza 7.
Oh, well, I was just thinking I would do my other game while I was here, and that was or we could alternate, but I figured I would get through it quickly. Was Triangle Strategy,
Hmm.
which is another tactical RPG. It's one in the style of Octopath Travel, that HD 2D remake, or
Yep.
not. I guess this isn't a remake, that HD 2D design, and the upcoming game, what is it, Live Alive, is also going to be in HD 2D. So it's like
Yeah.
it's a whole new thing that Square Enix is doing. And I had played the demo of this back in February, and I wasn't like 100% on it because I wasn't necessarily enjoying the story. I didn't like the voice acting. Some of the characters were not getting to me. But I'm glad I gave it another chance because I've kind of gotten past the voice acting. Like, it can kind of be hammy at points, but it's grown on me. And the story is kind of getting into some interesting political ideas, and the characters they're okay. Some of them are endearing, some of them are, there's a lot of characters, so it is hard to keep track of them. But overall, the story I'm enjoying. The combat is pretty fun. It's seems pretty deep. Like, there's a lot of aspects to it, and I'm still kind of learning how to play it. Like, I've definitely had some moments where I put my character in a bad spot, and they got a bunch of hits, and I they barely survive. So there's a lot to it. There's elevation. You have to worry about getting attacked from behind. You have to worry about, you know, getting your character in between two enemies because of, they're adjacent. They can do a follow up attack, and you can change the environment. Like, you can melt ice or freeze squares. You can light oil on fire. You can electrocute water. So there's all these different ways you can affect the environment.
That's all cool.
It's I think it's way more strategically complex than Fire Emblem Three Houses, and from what I've read online, that's the general sentiment. Like, people are very impressed with the gameplay. The main complaint I had is that the main story battles just don't give you enough experience. So I'll be in one chapter, and the story battle will have a recommended level of 7, and I'll maybe a few of my characters will get up to 8 if they were already at level 7, and then the next battle will be level 9, and there'll be like one side battle you can use to grind. So I'm like grinding for an hour just to get it to like and maybe I don't need to do that, but I feel that I have to, because I feel like I have to meet that level recommendation. It's, maybe I don't really need it, but I don't like how it doesn't seem to give you enough options to increase the levels while your characters. I
Interesting.
will say there are a lot of like cool characters in terms of like the variety of abilities they have. I'm still getting into it. I've really only played that one for like 7 or 8 hours. That's really all I have to say.
Okay. And I've heard about the voting system on other podcasts. Do you have you managed to interact with that, and do you have any thoughts?
Oh yeah, I had one story branch where I had to choose which foreign nation to go to, and you had to like talk to all your party members and get them to, vote in your favor. And I was able to sway them to vote to the one I wanted to go to. But I I haven't had another experience with the voting system, so I don't know how reliable it is to get it every, maybe it's hard to get the option you want every time.
Sure,
So
sure.
I'll have to report back when I get to another one of those voting rounds.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more. And last question, does it have difficulty settings at all?
Yeah, it has difficulty settings. I'm not playing on the easiest one, but I'm playing on one of the easier ones.
Yeah, and I wasn't calling you out on that. I was just curious because like that's another thing
Yeah,
for
I don't
the
care. I
audience.
play on easy most of
And
the I it
I don't
usually
discourage.
if there's a normal, easy, and hard, I usually play on easy. But if there's a very easy, I don't play on like Persona 5 had a safety difficulty, and I
Hmm.
didn't play on that, and I that just apparently trivializes it to nothing. Like you still kind of have to think about what you're doing on this. I guess that's the complaint I have about Yakuza Like a Dragon is it doesn't really feel like I have to engage much with the systems. It's basically just attack the enemy that you want to go down, focus all your attacks on one enemy until you get rid of it, and then heal if you're hurt. So it's like
Interesting.
it's nice to have some level of adept to the game,
Right.
even if I don't have to like super learn it like as I would if I were playing on the hardest difficulty.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing more about that the triangle strategy. So then these next two things kind of overlap because I went back to Scarlet Nexus. I don't remember if I already talked about when I beat the first half on the podcast, but other than mentioning that I beat the first half. So I played through as the male character Yuito, and I'm now more than halfway through the girl side, which is Kasane. And so the closest thing I could relate this to is kind of the like route A, route B of Near Automata in terms of like you're kind of playing through the same story, but you're seeing a different side of it. Now, in Near Automata, the two characters are together, so you are almost exactly seeing the same side, but you're seeing it from someone else's perspective. But it's almost the exact same events. Whereas with Scarlet Nexus, Kasane's events, she is separated from. She's on a different team, but you're in the same world, you're in the same space, and the same stuff is happening, but you are on the other side of events. So you're what happened in Yuito's story is happening here, and you saw where like eventually the teams split up, and then they are going down different paths for their own reasons, and they bump into each other throughout the story until they eventually like come back together at the end, and you get to use the full cast in there, and you can you're still locked to whoever your primary character is, but the other one just becomes like a secondary like special ability. So I'm really fascinated because I like the writing in this game, and I think the story is actually exceptional for for a JRPG. It's one of the more interesting RPGs, and considering that Tales of Arise was also really good, and the Ed, I remember when we were talking about 13 Sentinels and how things were twisting and turning and whatnot, and the things I was hearing also from like podcasts about the craziness. This Scarlet Nexus had a very similar experience. Like with I didn't really see any of these plot points coming, and as we hit certain beats and revelations, like it was just like flooring me one after another of like, wait, what? Wait, what does this mean? Are you saying this is how recontextualizing everything you've been in? And while Yuito's had a lot more mystery to it, Kasane seems to get a lot more of the answers to the mysteries right away because she's kind of on like the inside of things that are going on. But her character interactions and things are completely different. She works with a completely different side of the cast. And you see so much of these other characters in the way that from by being on this side that it's just like I feel at the same time this is a really big game, and I don't know how that they could have written these two things together in a way that would have felt good. Because in an ideal world, Scarlet Nexus would play more like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart in terms of how you'd switch between Ratchet and Rivet, because they were both having their own side adventures inside of this one adventure. So that's actually the best analogy I could give to you, Ed, is that's what Scarlet Nexus is, but like strongly divided, where it's like, what if you just played the Ratchet side and then you played the Rivet side, is like playthrough B.
Okay.
And if this was, if you put it together, because then also if I was to link it to Persona, because there's basically a S-Link stuff there that lets you power up your party members that give you extra abilities to use, because they have abilities that are active that help you with exploration and combat, but then there's also passive abilities that either they'll defend you, they'll add in additional attacks, their powers get stronger, etc. I don't know, and like, you're getting the same plot. You're just getting more details by playing as the other character, because you can just play as Kasane first, and then you can play as Yuito and see all the stuff that he was going through. And you kind of just get the reveals in different orders, and you get different reveals because some stuff is a matter of fact on this, whereas in like Yuito's, you're waiting for the answers and you're just getting more questions, whereas Kasane, you get the answers and you have to deal with them. It's very weird, and I can't really envision the game and how it would mesh together so you are getting the whole plot together at the same in one run. Especially since they were
Are you happy with the order you played it in? The male character first?
yes, that ultimately, yes. I think playing as Yuito first is the intended and the better way to do it because of the way it is there. But because of that also, it's really tough unless you're like in love with these characters, in love with this world, and in love with the gameplay, to get to say like, hey, like you just spent like about 20 to 30 hours on this. Go over and do this side and go and play through, because you get more character interactions, you get to play more of this game. But the thing that really makes it tough is Kasane pretty much goes through all the exact same areas as well and fights like all the same enemies. You really don't get much unique set pieces or things like that to deal with. A few things are different. She gets a few unique zones and definitely a few unique plot points that you only hear about in Yuito's, and you get to see them here, and that's much cooler. But it's really tough then also, because if you play the other side, I feel like it's just different writing styles. Like they both, like it's the same story just written two different ways. Like one, like what if we made this super anime mystery thing where you don't get the explanations until it's way too late, and then here's this one, like what if we wrote it like kind of a Western thing where we're just kind of gonna explain everything and just watch how these characters deal with it. It's fascinating. I do love that this game exists. It's so hard to like sell it to someone, and the best thing I can do is to explain that this is what this game is. I wish there was more combat. There's like training missions you can do on the side, but you really don't need to. I'm just kind of beelining it. The only best thing I could say about like encouraging someone to play through twice is that it has a new game plus feature now. So when you play through and you beat it the one time, your level carries over to the second character, so you get all your skill points right away, so you can buff up. You carry over all your weapons and items and stuff, and then you just level up the character's stats. They're S-links, basically. Again.
It didn't have that at launch?
I don't think so. I feel like that was a free update later on, because I didn't play Scarlet Nexus, or I didn't beat Scarlet Nexus.
I'm glad I've waited then, because I think that would have sucked to have to start over.
I didn't beat Scarlet Nexus, but before like I was playing through Scarlet Nexus as that update happened, and then before I beat the game, that update was already in place. And I don't think it mattered. I think it would have retroactively worked, so you could have started a new game and used the save game file state. Because I still think there was like criteria in the back, and they've been putting out DLC and stuff. And as I talked with you about, they did a collaboration thing with Tales of Arise, which is just a couple costume pieces. It's nothing really crazy. But that was I don't know if they're still going to update this game. I think they're pretty much content complete in terms of like critical story stuff. But I really do hope that they do another Nexus game, take this combat, get a little more budget, hopefully next time. Keep this writing staff, because they nailed the writing. Like that is the thing. I'm playing through on the English voice work, and it's an amazing performance. If you're choosing to play in English, I think the characters are all great. They're likable. Everyone's got great arcs. The combat's fun. I think it still needs some things to be fixed. It's a little wonky in some places, but it feels like they were kind of starting from scratch. Honestly, it feels like this was going to be a dot hack GU game, and they're like, we need to make a new franchise because GU like dot hack is done. So this feels like a spiritual successor to that, not in terms of plot or anything, as far as I can tell. It's just like the way certain animations are, the way the characters play. There's just stuff that reminds me of dot hack. But yeah, I think it's a great game. I don't remember if it's still on Game Pass, but there's a new demo. They redid the demo so you can play basically the first chapters of either player's story, and then your save progress will carry into the full game if you choose to buy it. So that's great there. It's on PC. It's on PlayStation. And yeah, I think this game deserves some attention, and I think it deserves a sequel. Not necessarily, even if they don't do this exact story thread continuing, I think they could continue the story. There's some aspects to which and it's not a clear cliffhanger, so it's not like you'll get to the end and be like, oh man, clearly they're setting up for a sequel. It's like, no, it's a satisfying conclusion that gets you to also leaves room for like, oh, if they wanted to revisit this world, they totally could. But at the same time, they could also just keep the gameplay and like this style of like action RPG / visual novel, which I mean, I guess what JRPG isn't part visual novel, I guess. And then move forward into and create like Nexus. I'd say Nexus would be like the franchise, and they could do like Azure Nexus or whatever if they wanted to. Instead of Scarlet Nexus 2.
Not bad.
Yeah, and like Tales, where they can just like keep this kind of gameplay systemic loop and just create this new type of game that's still different enough from the Tales games to make it fun. The only thing I'd say is kind of like if you like Tales and you're gonna try Scarlet, you don't ever get to control your party members. They're like on the field and they help and they have AI, but you can't take direct control. They basically become like extra special moves for you. So that might be frustrating for some people. I feel like also this game like has a template for co-op. I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually like a thing that got cut from the game. But just the size of the arenas, the way those characters work, and the way things are, I could see that. I could easily see that game getting like a co-op mode where you just like play through missions and fight bosses. And maybe that's something they could do too. I know people were upset when Tales of Arise cut out the local multiplayer feature where other players could jump in and take control of the other characters in combat, which once again, I think that there's room for them to take that and put those into separate games where you can have teams of people play and do co-op missions together. Or just, yeah. So that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, I really like Scarlet Nexus. I can still feel where it's got budget constraints, but it's really impressive for what they did and because of the story in the world. And I like that style of gameplay. I just, it's really weird because like, I think people should play it, but I can understand why people might feel like there are better games out there. Because there are better games, but this is like kind of 13 Sentinels where like, it just nails some stuff you just don't see other games really nail properly, while it kind of at the detriment to other stuff. And I feel like this is the stuff that matters more. But yeah, so that's cool. And to overlap with that, I have a Steam Deck. So Scarlet Nexus, I've been able to play pretty well on the Steam Deck from time to time. I'm bouncing back and forth between my laptop, gaming laptop, and the Steam Deck now. It ran pretty well. There was a little bit of bugs that was happening with the settings switching between the two, but I figured out how to solve that on my own through experimenting.
Does the save sync properly?
Yes, it was a little buggy at first, but I think that had to do with the fact that like because it's a different resolution between the two, like the settings just weren't lining up, so it wasn't rendering the screen. But once I figured out what setting let it switch between the two properly, it stopped having the issue. Also, Steam Deck is getting updates every like day, so they've probably been patching stuff, improving Proton, improving the Steam Sync and detection. But it ran at pretty much a steady 60. And I'm not limiting my frame rate to 30 while playing on the deck. I don't see the reason. I've obviously complained ad nauseum about the Switch and that. So yes, if I can't get a game to run at 60 on the deck, I don't need to run it on the deck unless it's absolutely necessary or if it's like maybe a slower pace game. I'm trying to avoid that. Overall, I think the hardware is really cool and really impressive. I really hope Valve is inspired to make a more powerful deck in the near future and do like a deck 2. I think they're likely to do so. And I really only have a few small qualms about it. I did not install Windows 10 on it. I'm leaving the basic Proton on there. The D-pad is not my favorite for fighting games, but it's competent. Like I can play some fighting games and it feels responsive enough for me to play, and but not in any serious capacity. I would never do that. With the way these buttons feel. The trackpads are kind of neat, but I haven't really played a game yet that requires me to like. I would use the right trackpad for camera control before I'd use the left for something. Um, the screen's beautiful, touch screen's great. The ergonomics are awesome. It's so weird because it's definitely heavier than the Switch, but because of the way the grips are and how easy it is to hold, at least for me, like it feels lighter than the Switch when I'm like holding it for a long period of time. Like it just it's very comfortable. Um, some of the menus can be a little confusing, and the only reason I've really figured them out is because I'm used to like looking around and stuff, or I've looked up some videos. Um, the battery life on it, it's completely fine. I haven't really taken it out of the house too much, and I haven't done any extended experiences with it. The battery I do have, unfortunately, doesn't output enough power to actively charge the deck, so I would have to get a new battery for that, but I haven't decided if I'm going to do that. Um, and then the only other thing, and this is completely personal, the capacitive thumbsticks are like really slick for me. They don't have enough like grip above for me for the way I like usually fit my thumb, so I feel like I'm constantly sliding off the sticks. I just recently bought some covers for them. These slide on easily on and off, so I just have them on most of the time, which means I can't use the capacitive um, if feature actively. I'd have to take it off to do that, but if I need to, I can easily pop them on and off. It's not difficult. And since it's capacitive, I was just thinking about like I have a capacitive stylus. How is that doing it if I'm not touching it directly or not making direct contact with whatever? And I'm like, maybe there's something I can stick on the inside of these caps that will let me just make it work capacitive wise, because I think it's just capacitive like detection. It's not like my thumb is on the inner circle guiding stuff. It's like more to detect that my thumb is on there, at least to my understanding. I could be completely wrong, but
I
that
think you're
that's pretty much
right.
it. um and then the bumpers are a little weird for me. Just like there's, it's a super smooth edge between the bumpers and triggers. Fit my index fingers rest very comfortably on the triggers, and then it might just be muscle memory because I'm used to very defined edges with like the PlayStation controller buttons and Xbox's like bumper buttons and the defined edges between those. But that's something I've had to take a little time to get used to. But I enjoy playing with it. And the back bumpers, the extra back buttons, um, I've been remapping them per game. I pretty much am trying to use the same thing, and they're just a duplicate of the face buttons. My fingers rest very naturally on them, but it does feel a little bit tough to press. You can kind of either squeeze it or you can press down in the back, and I feel like if you press into the back, that's a bit easier to do and a bit more of the intention. Um, but other than that, yeah, the system's great. I think the Steam Deck is actually a marvel, and I haven't loaded up any emulators or things. I'm still messing around with a few games here or there. Elden Ring does not run really good on it, and most games I have to turn down the settings to get to 60, but you really don't notice. And like I put Bioshock One remastered on here, runs at a flawless 60, looks really good. Um, I put Dead Space One on there, and other than Dead Space's own like weird hardware inconsistencies in terms of like right stick to mouse movement, because I don't think it ever got true controller support. Um, on PC, I'm gonna try that. I just had to tweak the settings personally to get the right analog stick to feel correct, and because I played that game back on 360, so naturally I played with like built natural controller support. And that's just there, and that runs also really well, and that's pretty cool. And that runs at high. I can run it at its high settings, but it's not a super demanding game. So I'm trying things out here and there. I'm experimenting. I download stuff just to see how well it runs on Switch. Oh god, yeah, on Switch, on the Steam Deck, and yeah, I'm just playing around with it. The more I play with it, the more I like it, and the more I actually find myself wanting to find excuses to play it. I haven't tried docking it yet and play exporting to the TV. From what I've heard, is that certain docks could possibly brick the system right now, which could be either fixed with compatibility issues or it's not something I need to really
It's
experiment
like
with.
the Switch back when the docks were
Right.
bricking the Switch.
So so I'm not experimenting with that because I have a computer, so I can hook that up to my TV, and the deck I just pretty much use as a portable device, or if I'm like want to keep it with me in my office, so like if I'm taking a quick break, I could play something and then put it down. Did you have any questions about the deck for me, Ed?
um So I remember reading some argument on the internet. I wanted your thoughts on this. This is kind of related, but would you say the deck is not a success if it doesn't sell as much as the Wii U? Because I was reading some Reddit thread where someone was arguing like, this thing isn't a success if it's only selling a few million. It's just a niche product. Like, what do you what at what level do you think you would consider the Steam Deck to be a success? Like, I wonder even what they're shooting for. This is kind of an offshoot. It just came to my head while you were talking.
No, I think that's a fascinating question. Um,
Like if it only sold 12 million, that's less than the Wii U. So obviously it's a failure, right? But like what at what point do we consider the Deck a success?
so this is interesting because the deck is the latest entry in a new genre of electronic devices, which there are other devices out there that do this. Basically, gaming form factor portable PCs. There's a whole bunch of other ones out there. You can Google and YouTube them to see, and all sorts of different successes. The
Yeah, I
Steam,
think there's like the Neo, there's the One X player.
yeah,
Those are the ones I know of.
the Steam Deck, Valve's Steam Deck, is the most refined version of what those things do. And the other defining factor is that Valve created Proton, a specific operating system to make games compatible and to better fit the device. Whereas most of those other systems are just being Windows or Android devices with minor, with some compatibility tweaks in their software, probably, or their hardware.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is gonna be, and I'm not trying to make excuses because I Valve really doesn't need this to be a success because it's really just another way for them to get player people to engage with Steam, their marketplace. Um, and they've clearly seen that people want this. Like more and more of these devices are coming out from third parties that are selling far less, and clearly the market is big enough to support those more independent ventures, and they're making new versions and they're refining it and whatnot. So what's going to define, and this is also a slower rollout, like the chip shortage is a whole other thing. Valve is
Mm.
not mass producing these and putting them in retail. Valve is only fulfilling these through Steam. So it's like if Nintendo was only selling Wii U's through nintendo.com, then like that changes the context of the story. Valve is literally only selling these, and they're fulfilling orders as fast as they literally can, from like the most expensive orders down to the cheaper ones. Or um I might be wrong on that. Maybe it's also in terms of the time spent. I know it's time, but I figure but there's the three price tiers for it, and I did buy the most expensive one. The main reason I bought it was not just because of the better hard drive, 512 gigs SSD, uh, M2 SSD, or forget that's a certain M form factor.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the thing that actually, it has an SD card slot which they optimized in order to do the good transfer rates, and I bought a 1 TB SSD card and threw it in there, and it's great. Is that this one has an etched screen to reduce glare. So that to me is a super important factor for a handheld. So that's the main thing. Otherwise, I probably would have just gone with the cheapest model and then threw in the 1 GB SD card and been like, that's cool. Because I wasn't even planning on having a ton of games on this thing. I was going to take like whatever multiplayer games ran well, and maybe like my one single player game, as long as it ran well, that I'm playing at the time. So I can, like, if I take it with me, I go on a vacation or I go on a trip or I'm visiting or something, I can load it on here. So I'm not trying to max out this thing. It's not my primary, it's an accessory. So um, I think the terms of success are very different than what Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft would say for their gaming platforms. This is going to have a much longer tail. I've been talking over with some of my more PC focused friends, and we're kind of speculating that within 18 months we may even see a Steam Deck 2 or like a Pro Steam Deck that'll be like upgraded and up with the better specs, because of the chipset in here. Like the new version of the chipset is probably set to roll out within like the next 12 months. So it would be smart for Valve to be on top of that to get Steam Deck 2 ready, and then kind of phase out either the top line or change the top line into this Pro version to create better value. Um, Once again, it's complete speculation. Uh, it would be nice to see higher specs on there to just get more consistent 60 FPS on games. Like it's already running at it's a 16 by 10 screen, so it's 1280 by 800. So most games either run at that or they scale to 720. So you're already running things at like super low resolution. Um, so like I said, like Bioshock 1 Remastered, which was a touched up game, and then Dead Space 1. So we're playing 360 and even like some PS4 level games on this thing. And Scarlet Nexus plays at low settings, so it's probably like the equivalent to the PS4 version portably. And when I say that, portable
But it
PS4,
runs at 60, right?
yeah, the game's got some spots that are not optimized well, so it does chug in spots, but it's the same as when it's on my desktop. Maybe I get a few more frame dips here or there when there's a lot of particle effects or enemies on screen, but I haven't had a situation where I felt like, ooh, this was really bad. Like I don't want to keep playing on the deck. I'm actually like,
Yeah.
I want to keep playing. Yeah. So I think that the success will be different, and this is a niche, and this might explode, especially if Steam continues to Valve continues to update Proton and gets that thing to a super compatible level. People already have been doing tons with emulation work, so I think that appeals to a lot of people. If they keep that $400 price point, or even eventually get that down to 300, I think some people, there's a lot of people who will probably buy this thing as a companion to their computer, and it will also at the cheaper price point be a attractive thing for people who are like, well, I don't really need to play full PC games, but like I want to emulate. I want to play Super Nintendo games on the go. I want to play N64, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, these old games. I know how to get this stuff going, and I'd like a dedicated device that's going to work really well with these things. And hey, maybe every once in a while I'll play some indie games on there that are like that because of my nostalgia. And maybe once in a while a new game. I think it's going to have like secret, it's going to like stealth appeal, and as it gets out there, I think it's going to be like VR. It's going to be a really long tail and a slow roll, and the tech just has to get to a point. And this is like the Quest 1 of of handheld, of these like PC handhelds. Quest 1,
Oh yeah, I mean, you had the Quest One, then the Quest. Well, you had the Quest Go. I think our friend Mike has the Quest Go, and
right?
then there's
That
the
but
Quest Two. So
that's a different
but there were
tier.
there were a lot of
Yeah.
iterations, yeah,
And
and options,
I
yeah,
meant by when I say Quest 1, I mean it was the fully wireless VR headset,
yeah,
self-contained console headset with the
yeah.
controllers. The computer thing was completely optional. You just bought this, you put games on it, you can play anywhere, you can make your zones. It was self-contained. It was the most accessible it's been, and it's the first wave, and it makes you go like, "Holy crap, this is the future of this tech." So this makes me feel like Valve is going to like they're not going to do Steam machines anymore. This is the new Steam machine. Valve is going to basically be like, we will sell our own specific hardware, and this is now within a niche that is a companion to PC rather than overlapping, because it's kind of a fool's errand to pursue, especially at this point in time with the chip shortage and the whole crypto miners with graphic card wars and stuff like that. That's a constant debacle, really. Um, Creating this dedicated device that fits this niche, and also tons of people love portable. I mean, heck, Ed, I bet there'd be a strong, if this was just had Mac OS on it, and you could just play like a bunch of those third party games that you already had like on consoles and stuff, you probably would have bought one yourself.
I don't know if Mac OS would have them to do it, but maybe if there were one that could play like the Xbox games that I play,
Right, right.
maybe, or a PlayStation, yeah,
And
but
hey, word has it that, I mean, Microsoft already brings its games to Steam, and it seems like like Steam and Microsoft are, excuse me, Valve and Microsoft are in talks to try and get Game Pass working through Steam somehow. Not sure how. Not sure what it
if
means.
I could
That'd be cool.
continue, like, if I could do cross save with like if I could continue the save that I have on my Xbox on a Steam Deck on Steam OS, then yeah, maybe I would, because I don't really want to have a full PC, to be honest. But if I could continue the save from, but I don't know when they're gonna have that kind of cross compatibility, if ever. it just seems like there's too many stakeholders that aren't convinced on letting people actually play games where they want to play them.
Yeah, I think that's gonna get brute forced. That would be my opinion based on my experience with the Steam Deck. Is you can't escape it. People
Yeah,
jailbreak their phones. People jailbreak their tablets.
yeah.
Controllers sync to that stuff wirelessly. Cloud gaming is still getting worked on. Um, I haven't tried the Steam Link where I'm like using a stream from my PC to the deck. I've had some friends who have tried it and say they like it, that they've had good experiences. It felt really smooth. I don't see the point based on the way my setup is, but it's neat that the feature's there and it seems to be working as intended. Um, but yeah, I think that
I like that Steam OS with Proton is proving to be a viable alternative to Windows, because I just think it's better to have more players on the market than have Windows be the only OS that can play PC games. So
yeah,
I'm sure Valve, that's part of the reason they wanted to push a Steam Deck, is because they don't want to be dependent entirely on Windows for their ecosystem. But
yep,
I think that's cool that they're making it so games can work on another platform,
yeah.
namely, Linux.
And it's a shame that developers don't do more for making games cross compatible with Mac. I'm not even sure how many big AAA games have Mac versions and stuff. That might be something interesting you might want to look into, Ed, and let me know since you're the Mac guy.
Yeah.
See how many like it does Yakuza Like a Dragon on PC. Is it compatible on Mac Steam? I don't
I
know.
don't know. I'd have to look. I have Steam on my Mac right now. I could check.
Yeah, yeah. Is Game Pass? Can you even get the Game Pass app on?
I don't think so.
That seems like a huge oversight too. But who know? We don't know if that's Microsoft or if that's Apple who might be saying like, you're not allowed to. I
I
know that
mean, Apple can't really say that with Mac OS. Mac OS is open. They can't tell someone they can't make a Mac app. They can just make it difficult for people to install it because they have all these. Well, we're going way too well beyond things, but yeah,
insert John Cena gif. Are you sure about that? Yeah,
you can run any you can run unsigned software on Mac OS. You just have to go through like all these steps to say, "Yes, I'm really sure I understand the risks." Like they make it difficult for the average user to do it, but you can.
yeah.
Like no one no you anyone can write software for Mac. It's open.
Right, but we're
But
talking about appealing to the average user or trying to get down to the average user because you want to convert that user base. You want to make it that like that's where the console people are. Like the console people are the average consumer of like
I don't know if Mac or Apple would let them put it on the Mac App Store, if that's what you're asking.
yeah.
Probably not.
So that's what I was getting at. But who knows? We'll
Yeah.
find out. Yeah, and the next thing I'm looking forward to playing is after I finish the second half of Scarlet Nexus, is Horizon Forbidden West, and then after that, I've heard some good things about Ghostwire Tokyo, so I'm hoping to pick up that one and play through that. That seems like a bit shorter of a game. And then I think I will actually delve into Bioshock One Remastered, which was my plan, is to form my thesis on survival horror after playing Resident Evil 8 Village. Yeah, I'm still stuck on that, and I'm gonna do it. Um, but yeah, and there's still tons of stuff. While I am super frustrated, Ed, you know this, as I slam a piece of plastic on my table, uh, is that Kingdom Hearts Collection was not announced for Steam exactly 1 year after it came to Epic Game Store, and they've done a lot of promotions. They announced Kingdom Hearts 4 and two mobile games that might as well just not exist or just be released straight on YouTube because who cares about their mobile games? Um, Clearly enough people to make them enough money to keep doing it, but clearly, you know, I bet they get good YouTube ad revenues. I'm sure some of those channels are probably their own. I wouldn't be surprised. That's my conspiracy theory, and I'm sticking to it. But yeah, so there's still plenty to play. But I would really like to have those definitive versions on PC, and then I could play them on my Steam Deck, which would be great. But we'll see. And you're continuing Triangle Strategy and Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Oh yeah, and I'll play Scarlet Nexus after that, and I'm interested in Fire Emblem Three Warriors Three Hopes, but I don't know if that's gonna run like garbage, and if I should just wait until the Steam the Switch 2, or I don't know what I'm gonna do with that.
The Steam
And then
Switch. Yeah.
yeah, Steam Switch. Yeah, maybe I need a Steam Deck just so I can play Switch games at a decent. Wow, I don't know. I don't know if anyone has them working yet, but
They
they probably
do.
will
Go look
eventually.
up some
Do
videos.
they?
You're gonna be mad.
Oh yeah.
You'll be like, I don't
Well,
want to.
I still have my Steam Deck pre-order.
If you looked up videos, I'd feel like you'd text me in an hour and be like, I don't want to buy a Steam Deck. Why can't Nintendo just release the Switch 2 already?
I have my doubts that they're even gonna go back and patch the games that don't run. They might even just sell them to you
I'm
again
just
at
not even sure,
$60.
man. Yeah, I don't even know, man. But that's a discussion
I
for
it,
another episode.
I don't even know if they understand that people actually want, or maybe they understand it, but they don't care that people want it to run well. And even if
Probably
it
not.
could run well on the new Switch, they might not do anything to make that happen.
Okay. I completely dodged this. That unintentionally, I meant to bring it up, but I just was trying to get the other things because I do need to highlight. I've played Elden Ring on PC. Yes, the performance issues are there, and while very noticeable, I have done like everything I can to like mitigate them. From like I'm using a laptop with a 3070, so that's my baseline. I use my TV and I have variable refresh rate. I play at 1080p to do that. And the best thing I say is like the problems are totally noticeable for me, and the game has just been good enough, and the issues have not gotten in my way enough to actually harm the experience. On deck, no, too low. The deck is not powerful enough to brute force that game into running. But on desktop, it's been fine, and with the optimization patches, it's gotten better each time. So yeah, the performance issues are real. They're not fake. It can differ per setup. For me, it is noticeable but manageable. And the PlayStation 4 version on PS5 is still considered the most stable version, stable way to play that game. I'm not sure about the Xbox versions, but that's just a PSA for people out there. And also, sorry that it took so long for me to say that on the episode. I'm sure there's going to be, if for any listeners, they might rage at the beginning and say like, well, how could he not bring up the performance issues? There you go. I've ended the episode on it. I'm sorry about that. I should have said it sooner. Okay, I think that's it. Another successful episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just having a lot of fun with what I'm playing, so it sounds like you are too.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Good for both of us. And we hope everyone else is having fun playing stuff. We wish you all well. Be safe. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Ed, for being with me again today. And see you again next time.